So we're going to get started, but please keep your answers rolling in the question and answer. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can participate. We want to keep this webinar engaging. We want it to be a two-way conversation as best as we can. So continue answering the question and answer, and we will try to make sure that we get your responses heard. But we're going to get started with the official program. So welcome here to our very first episode of the Make It Big webinar series. This is part of Autodesk Make It Real program. This is our fourth year and our second year working with James Develin, football star, three-time Super Bowl champion. He played for the New England Patriots as well. So we're super excited to have him here to share his story and to talk about what inspires him in his next adventure in life, finding his new possible. So this episode is called Play with an Idea. And again, this is the first episode. So we're excited you're here from the beginning. So how to participate, thank you so much for those of you who have already started to participate and really start to build a rich discussion about what inspires us to make things. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, there are three icons. So there's a chat icon, there's a raise hand icon, and there's a question and answer icon. So we have the Autodesk education team here with us to help us keep you engaged and to answer your questions throughout the webinar. So we have Matthew Dalton, who is a community manager for Autodesk Education. And when you are asking questions in the chat, he's going to be one of the humans that's responding to you. He's the adult human in the photo as well. And also we have Donald Bell, who is, he runs marketing and communications for Autodesk Education. So he will also be responding to your questions in the chat. If you are a student, and maybe you're a student who has experienced distance learning and you're used to having your video on and that you can chat with your classmates, we can't do this in this environment because we want to make sure that we protect your privacy. So that is why when you chat during the webinar, you can only send questions to people who are panelists. So Donald and Matthew will be responding to you, but to protect your privacy, we don't want you to be chatting with each other. Also, throughout the webinar, again, we want to keep this discursive, to keep this a discussion. We will be pushing out kind of some bigger questions to you. And when you're answering those questions, like the one that we just answered, please try to keep your responses in the question and answer. That will go to Jenny Fennell, who is the content development manager for Autodesk Education. And we will periodically check in with Jenny to see, what are some interesting deep thoughts that you have. And we hope that this inspires you to have deep thoughts. So again, my name is Kellyanne Mahoney. I'm a youth program specialist at Autodesk. I'm based out of Boston. I actually was a teacher in the Boston Public Schools for 13 years before I joined Autodesk. And I straddle both the education team, but I am technically on the construction team at Autodesk. And I wanted to just hand it over to Heather to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Heather Leck. And I'm also located in the Boston office with Kellyanne, and I am a product manager for a product at Autodesk called FormIt, and I'll be showing that to you in a little bit. So welcome, and I'm excited to show you FormIt in a little bit.
Thank you, Heather. I can't wait for that demonstration. I think we're all going to learn a lot. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce James Develin, who's here with us today.
How you doing, guys? I'm James Develin. Thank you, Kellyanne, for that introduction. I am currently down in southern New Jersey, so that's my home base, but recently retired from the NFL, played with the Patriots for 8 years and 2 years with the Cincinnati Bengals. So a long time playing football, and now I'm excited to do my next steps and see what's possible for me out beyond football. So looking forward to this conversation tonight, and thank you all for showing up. It should be a good time.
Thank you, James, and it's a delight to have you here as well. James also did not mention that he was an engineering student at Brown, so he also has an engineering degree, and that's a little bit about his backstory that we're going to learn from James today as he tells his story and shares his vision for the future in terms of what his next step is post-football, but also integrating his love of football into that. So we do hope that you take away some lessons and some insights from today. We hope that you get hands-on with a tool that architects use to make construction-ready drawings in collaboration with engineers. So that will include a demonstration of FormIt with Heather. We also will consider how you can apply your technical skills, innovation, and design thinking to help James tell his story to potential stakeholders. So one part of James's story is, as a next step, he is envisioning a designing and building project that he's going to share with you. And he's also interested in your insights, particularly students, and ideas, because we know that young people think of things that, you know, we may not ever consider. So he wants to be innovative in his next step in what he's designing and building, and he's hoping for your feedback in that. And he also is going to let you know that in providing him with insight and inspiration and feedback, in return, three students will actually win grand prizes as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about the contest component to this program. We also hope that in competing in these challenges, so there's going to be actually 3 design challenges that we introduce to you over the course of this school year, that you can begin to build a digital portfolio for yourself that could also earn you a chance not only to win prizes, but maybe even to think about applying for internships during the summer or potentially college. So as we are embarking upon this journey, it is going to include architecture, engineering, and construction. So we really want to tell you a story from the beginning about how a construction project comes together. You'll sometimes hear us say AEC, which is kind of an acronym for the AEC industry. But we're also going to be talking about changes in the AEC industry and how increasingly architects, engineers, construction workers, construction project managers are being asked to kind of collaborate and work together. And we hope that through telling this story that we can, you know, present kind of a unified vision of how that might happen in the future. So this is the game plan for this episode. So only James actually understands what this means, right? So the first section is we're going to talk a little bit about the future of AEC, so what the future of the architecture, engineering, and construction industry might look like. James is going to spend some time telling you his story and his vision for the future and what he would like to build and why. We're going to play around with an idea, so play with some shapes in Tinkercad and see what happens with them. And then we're going to go into a deeper demonstration of FormIt, where Heather shows us a tool that she's actually been teaching James, who is using FormIt actually to design his next project as well. I don't want to give it away yet. And finally, we are going to talk about the contest. So the contest component and how you can make it big and earn prizes and have fun and make cool things. So just to begin and giving you an idea about the future of the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, particularly from the perspective of Autodesk, we might ask ourselves, what will the future of the architecture, engineering, and construction industry look like? So in many ways, when we think about the future, we also start to think about the past as well. And another industry that the construction industry is actually learning from is the manufacturing industry. So even when we think back to, you know, early stages of automotive manufacturing, you know, one innovation was the assembly line. But through the assembly line, it opened up paths for newer innovations like integrating robotics and other technologies. So when we think about the future of construction, we wonder, you know, might it look, you know, more like a factory setting? You know, might it be a more controlled environment? Might it be a safer environment for workers? And through using like new workflows or new techniques like prefabrication and, you know, modular construction, what are ways that we can change the industry for the better to make housing more affordable, similar to the way that manufacturing in the automotive industry was able to make cars more affordable for more people? We also might want to think about how in using these new workflows and these new techniques, how could we make housing better for the planet and for the environment and for communities? So these are questions that we think about a lot at Autodesk. And we think about these questions because our customers are actually really pressed to answer these questions right away. So, you know, if you've ever driven in a high performance car before or seen an electric car, if you've ever marveled at a skyscraper or thought about how cool, you know, infrastructure is like bridges or you know, enjoyed a blockbuster film or a video, chances are you've actually engaged with something that was made by one of our customers. So when we think about what does the future of the AEC industry look like, it's kind of like a to answer question. We think about technologies in the future and what it means for our society, but we also think about you. So we think about young people, and we think about what changes you can make for the industry for the better. And that's one of the reasons why we give away our software, for the most part, for free to students and teachers and schools. So I just want to make it clear to you today that everything that we show you, you should be able to access for free using your account, as a student or as an educator. All right, so in thinking about the future of construction is driven by global trends and the future of architecture and engineering as well. So for example, 2019, which seems so long ago, but it's not. So in 2019 and even in 2020, we have about 7.5 billion people on Earth. 3.5 billion of those people live in cities. By 2050, we estimate that there will be 10 billion people on Earth, and 7 billion people are going to be living in cities. So global trends like population and also just kind of the urbanization of the population are driving the industry. Even trends such as, for example, the global middle class, 400,000 people enter the global middle class each day. So that's another trend that's impacting all the industries that Autodesk customers are engaged in. For example, when people enter the global middle class, they want things that everyone else has. They want more houses, they want cars, they want smartphones, they want reliable access to food like everybody wants. But that is placing demands on our planet as well that we need to really think about and puzzle over and try to solve. And particularly in the building industry, this trend in global population is requiring that we need to actually build 13,000 buildings a day by 2050. In addition to that, we need more infrastructure. So for example, we need enough roads and rails to wrap around the planet 30 times per year until 2050 to meet this growing demand. So when we think about the future of making, we think about how can we build and make more and build and make better, but do it by having a negative or minimizing the negative impact on the planet. So how can we build things, but also think about reducing waste, reducing harm to communities, reducing carbon emissions, and reducing depletion, and reducing the depletion of resources. We know that natural resources are not infinite. And particularly in the construction industry, we're thinking about the fact that 30% of global waste currently is from construction. Another really important resource for the future is talent as well. And one of the challenges that we face in the construction industry is 20% of the workforce is retiring. And when we think about architecture, over 2/3 of architects are actually over the age of 55. So this is a challenge for our industry, but it's also an opportunity for you as a young person to be able to access career paths that are interesting and lucrative, and also allow you to solve problems in order to make better communities and make better buildings that have a better impact on the planet. So we're asking you to enter into careers and to solve problems that allow you to make more, make better, but have less negative impact. So because of this, things are changing, the way that we make them is changing, and the way that we work is changing. So increasingly, people want things that are smart, that are connected, that have sensors, for example, that are responsive to human needs. The way that we make them is changing by integrating new technologies, like, for example, robotics. The way that we work is changing. It's becoming more collaborative. It's also, in many ways, particularly in the construction industry, in the shift from digital to physical, it is, even employing things like simulation in order to make work more interesting, but also more safe in the construction industry as well. So it's not just global trends that's driving the construction industry. It's also trends in mega trends in technology. So big data, artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, so robotics and automation, prefabrication and offsite construction, the Internet of Things, so things like sensors and connected devices, and additive manufacturing, such as 3D printing, for example. So it's also these global mega trends in technology are also introducing new roles in the construction industry that one might not have considered before. So for example, you could become a data analytics expert. And maybe in doing so, you might be employing machine learning in order to make sure that your workers on your construction site are safe. You might be gaining new skills, for example, in robotics or modeling and simulation, or being a drone pilot, so managing drones and robots as well. So this is just thinking again about architecture. This is a story from the way that our office in Toronto was redesigned. So this is a section of the office. So even in thinking about architects have always thought about human needs and really thinking about designing things that are meant to meet the needs of humans. But in addition to that, they are employing computation and automated processes in order to make designs that are more outcome driven. So for example, in our Toronto office, we asked questions to employees about what are some things that they value. So buzz, adjacency to the kitchen, for example. And then how could we collaborate with automated processes or with computers in order to come up with many different possibilities that then we could, jump in and, think about making informed trade-offs, for example. So, maybe we want natural light in the building, but we also want to make sure that there's not noise, in the space where the natural light is. So thinking about how we can collaborate with computers to make our work easier, but not let them overtake the process as well. So it also requires not just skills, but a new mindset. So when we get into the challenge, you're going to be asked to employ design thinking. When we say design thinking, it's an iterative process. There are different ways of defining the different phases. This is just one way of defining the phases of design thinking. So when you're using design thinking, you're doing human-centered design. You're thinking about a problem that you're trying to understand and address, and thinking about the impact of that problem on the end user. So you're conducting research, you're asking questions, you're really starting to try to understand that problem. Then you're moving into the define phase. So you might be, analyzing that data, putting it into categories, really trying to make sure that you understand what the problem actually is before you start to think about solutions. Once you get into the ideate phase, you're thinking about, hundreds of possible solutions to that problem. You might have crazy ideas or, outside of the box ideas. The more the ideas, the better. And when you move into the prototype phase, you're then taking one of those ideas and you're really trying to play with it, test it out, and get feedback on that idea, so that when you enter the refined phase, you're using that feedback in order to make your prototype or your solution even better. So before we move on to talking about James's idea, we want you to think about design thinking. So we have a poll for you. I'm very excited about it too. So the poll is, what phase of the design thinking process is the most challenging? So, and Jenny's pushing out the poll. I'm super excited. So please answer this question. So what phase of the design thinking process is the most challenging? I'm noticing ideate, understand. So it's moving up and down. Very cool. So it looks like ideate is in the lead right now, which is interesting because I think that sometimes that's the fun part of coming up with crazy ideas. Understand is hard too. All right, well, thank you for answering that poll. This is the first time I've done a poll over Zoom too. Oh, so I can share the results, cool. All right, okay, so moving on now to James. So we're gonna hear about James's idea. So I am going to hand it over to James to talk about his vision.
All right. Thank you, Kellyanne. So like I said before, my name is James Develin. I was a fullback for the New England Patriots, recently just retired this spring, had a 10-year career in the NFL. But what people don't typically know about me, unless they've kind of read into my story, is that I went to Brown. I was a mechanical engineer, concentrator, and I just honestly love and just have a calling for the field of design, construction, engineering. I first fell in love with architecture, and I really did in this. But I know. Sorry, it was my son. Yeah, I fell in love with architecture, in grade school. I actually had an opportunity to start drafting and just kind of drawing floor plans at a young age, in some programs in grade school, and I fell in love with it. It was a way that I could kind of combine my artistic mind with, more of a practicality and functionality, um, and really kind of combine the two, because I felt a good imagination. I loved art, but I also loved the maths and the sciences and those more practical studies. So it was a good way, for me to combine those two fields. And when I went and finally made my way to Brown, I wanted to be an architect, but they didn't have architecture. They kind of did. It was like the history of architecture. I would have had to take classes at RISD, which is down the hill in Providence, but I ended up having to kind of pivot there and figure out my next step. So I ended up going into mechanical engineering. I thought it was a good broad understanding of a lot of this field, and it proved to be that. It was tough, but it was definitely engaging, and I really got a lot out of it. So now that kind of brings me to where I am today. Like I said, I just retired in the spring, and now I'm starting to figure out my next steps in my second career. And so I was kind of given the opportunity, because of the 10 years I spent in the NFL, to kind of have a little bit of time to really make an informed and an educated decision on what I wanted to do next. And it kind of always came back to, well, I love football. I love training for football, but I also have this love that I kind of put to sleep 10 years ago when I followed my football dreams. And that is engineering, architecture, design, building, construction. So here I am now. I have these three passions, and I want to combine them all. So I really kind of hunkered down, and I thought, well, how do I combine those three things: football, training, and rehabilitation, and also construction. Well, I'm so I kind of came up with the idea of creating my own facility, that people can train and rehab injuries, and and provide a service and a opportunity to give back to the greater good. What I believe has been missing. In NFL facilities, we kind of have the best of both worlds. We have the best training staff and the best equipment and the best facilities, but then we also have some of the best medical experts, in each NFL city. And I want to be able to give that to the public, people that don't, play in the NFL on Sundays, people that are, just on their grind on 9 to 5s, or they like working out, or they are suffer, or just even the current kind of exposure that general mental and physical health has really shown, with around the COVID-19 pandemic. I think there's more of a calling to keep yourself healthy, really more than ever. So with that dream, I started in the spring, started vetting out properties in Philadelphia, which is where I would like to do this. And unfortunately, I was in Philly on March 15th, looking at spaces. I was, sending emails that night to real estate agents and all that stuff. And then March 16th, COVID kind of really came to a head, and, it shut everything down. So then as an entrepreneur, I pivoted and I said, all right, well, now I can kind of take a step back from doing this big dream. I can do a couple more smaller things and do a little bit more R&D. So that's where I am today. And that's where Autodesk has really come in handy because they've given me a relationship with Heather, who you'll meet later. Well, we already met, but you'll see more from her later. She's been kind enough to help me try to learn the FormIt program. So I'm going to share my screen here and show you what I've done to date. Self-admittedly, Kellyanne, I think you have to stop sharing. There we go. Right. So self-admittedly, I am no expert in FormIt, but this was my first project. This is actually a gym that I will come to own here in the next probably month, I'd say. It's a current gym in the town I live down in Jersey. It's a great little lifters gym. I know this might be boring to most, but this is something I'm truly passionate about. So I essentially just kind of built the facility that currently is standing there. I mean, it was, the thing that I love about FormIt is before I even started with Heather, I was able to really kind of build this more or less. But then once I started going through with Heather and really kind of getting down to the nitty gritty details, and understanding how to move walls and how to create windows and how to lay material down, it really kind of came to form. And then I was able to, really kind of walk through, which is one of my favorite things to do, do the walkthrough thing. And really, it's essentially just like walking into the gym like I do every single day. You look around, look off the mirrors. But then I did this and I was like, well, this is actually a great analytical tool to give me an opportunity to see spaces that are already in existence and learn from them and try to pick out things that I do differently if I were building a space from scratch. If it was just a vacant lot and I was able to put up all the walls, all the infrastructure, everything myself, how I would do it differently, things that I would add from spaces like this. And then I have a more recent one of a gym that I'm currently interested in. It's a little bit smaller of a space. So now the thing about this one is it's smaller. And so I was able, Heather helped me import some of this actual equipment to kind of give a better feel to how I could do a layout and how I could, with the scale that I have here, and keep everything else to scale, how much equipment could I put in? How this is a tighter space. These two rooms up here in the corner are bathrooms. They currently don't look like that. I would have to, do a little bit of construction to get it to that point. But it's just, it's a hugely helpful tool for me at this stage right now as an entrepreneur, being able to kind of learn from things and analyze things and just look at, how I would do things differently, how I would change spaces, how I would use the space. And if I had the opportunity, which I hope I do someday soon, what exactly I would do when I started breaking ground. And that's the point that I hope to get to here soon. And that's where I could use your help. As Kellyanne mentioned earlier, we have a challenge to all you students, all you educators that might think just a bit differently than I do, to provide just a fresh set of eyes on an idea like that I have. I mean, like I said, I'd like to build a fully immersive sports performance training facility that also provides the sports medicine side of sports and athletics as a whole, that I was able to kind of enjoy when I was in the NFL. So really when I'm looking at a space, I needed to have the dual functionality of being a training facility, but also being a rehabilitation facility, being able to provide both of those services in one space. So really, I'm looking for a lot of modularity here and a lot of dual uses to spaces. I need just some creativity, and I need a fresh set of eyes on things. I know you guys are hugely creative, and so even if it's I have just a couple ideas off the top of my head. I saw recently in a gym they had two staircases that went to nowhere, but they just came up on either side of the gym, probably 50 plus steps on either side, and it essentially took up maybe the landing of each stair. So it took up that much floor space, but it provided a training tool that's very unique, and very out of the box thinking, but in the middle of a gym, so obviously you need high ceilings, but I thought that was a great use of space, a great way to implement something different. Also, I thought of stadium seating, to provide space for a seminar or a learning education opportunity, but also it's stadium stairs at the end of the day. And what's a better workout than running up some stadium stairs, albeit it's probably going to be a shorter set, but I think that would be a great idea. Also implementing aquatics, which is something that obviously you don't see that in either of my two facilities I have here, but could be done if I were groundbreaking on a personal opportunity. And I thought of maybe like hot and cold tubs, for instance, are big, and doing a lazy river or something, a way to kind of keep people moving through, keep the water fresh, so it's not stagnant sitting water, just things like that. Also, one of the great things that I haven't gotten to yet, but Heather, I'm sure, can show you later, is the way that you can just analyze the true environment. As you can see, I kind of started building this on the actual property that this gym exists on, down in Brigantine. This is a couple miles from where I am right now. There's a parking lot, but you can actually go and analyze, the amount of sun that you'd get, throughout any day of the year, which I thought was awesome. It's an opportunity to, say I wanted to keep to the renewable energy thing. I wanted to put some solar panels up on the roof here, and take advantage of that. I'd be able to see, where the sun hits this building the most, and and where the best strategic place would be to use the solar panels. So I just think this is an incredible tool to really be able to analyze and kind of see without actually being there, and render a space, and honestly just make something new, make something creative, and make it as big as you want, as small as you want. It's such an incredible tool, and I'm very thankful for Kellyanne and Heather that have kind of put us all together and given me the opportunity to learn this and use it as a tool in my entrepreneurial endeavors here. So I'd really love to see what you guys have to, or what you think, how you going to think differently, and how to provide some fresh perspective that I may not think of in the years to come.
Thank you so much, James, for this challenge. It's so exciting, and you've given us a lot of ideas to play with as well. I love that you talked about like mechanical components, and just kind of talked a little bit about some of the criteria and some of the things that you care about, and how what you care about you want to build into the design. So that is my next question for you is, and this is for the group, because again, James is he wants to engage you, young people, as design partners, because he knows that young people oftentimes have more innovative ideas and think more outside of the box than adults. So This is the question that we have for you now. Sorry, I went back in my slides, but that was a cool film, wasn't it? So, all right, so the question right now, please answer this in the question and answer. So in one word, describe one of James's criteria or goals for his design. So again, we showed you in our Toronto office how we, polled people who worked in the office about, criteria or goals or things that they care about in their work environment. What did you hear from James? And this is the kind of the first step of the design thinking process, is really kind of thinking about, in consulting with James, he's going to be the building owner, what is his vision, and also kind of what is his vision for those who are going to be using his space. So do we have any responses, Jenny, in the question and answer?
Everyone, yes, we do. We have creative, rehabilitation, multi-purpose, and innovation, and also immersive. I said multifunction already.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what we have so far.
Awesome. And we have such great listeners in the audience as well, which is a very important part. And I think that Heather can talk a little bit about that as well. Her background is actually as an architect. And I often find that architects like you, young architects and architects who I meet who are professionals, they're really good listeners and very empathetic as well. So keep letting us know. Next step is I just wanted to, so James gave us a lot of ideas to play with. I just want to show you really quickly in Tinkercad how you can actually, even just start out with some shapes that you like and you can play with an idea. Before we get started, I just wanted to give you an example. So James said the word modularity. That's a concept that you might want to play with and explore. So this is just an example of one way this group Arup, which is a design group, I think based in Boston, came up with this idea of a skyscraper of the future. And how, oftentimes when we're thinking about being innovative, which is something that James also cares about, that sometimes like when we're testing things out, we might actually fail. And in the future, rather than building skyscrapers and one component of the skyscraper fails and you have to tear down the whole building or seriously, renovate the whole building, if we thought intentionally about, building things with more modularity, maybe you could swap out that component and put in a new one, or you could take that component and then move it into a different place. So this is just kind of a concept, futuristic kind of utopian vision of how we might employ modularity in the future. In order to, be more innovative. So just to define that word modularity that James talked about, which is an important component to his plan, modularity is the degree to which a system's components may be separated and recombined, often with the benefit of flexibility and variety in use. So James, for example, talked about his friends with the gym, with the stairs, and the stairs could be maybe used for a presentation space, but they could also be used as a workout space as well. So as I show you how I can play around in Tinkercad and how you could play around with Tinkercad, which is part of the Autodesk family, it's a tool that is a creativity tool that is free actually for everyone, not just students and educators. That's what I'm going to be showing you in a moment. And I want you to think about, as I'm giving you this demonstration, what makes a design modular and why is modularity a useful design strategy? All right, so this is Tinkercad. And you can find Tinkercad at tinkercad.com and sign up for an account really quickly. And really you can just get started right away. So you're just dragging and dropping shapes onto the work plane. So I drag out a cube and then I combined it with a pyramid. And you can manipulate those shapes, so change the sizes. What you see me doing here is adding a work plane to the bottom of that cube and adding another pyramid shape. And I'm doing that because I want it to connect to that cube. I'm drawing a box around it, I'm grouping it. This is the align tool. So you see me clicking on those nodes a lot to make sure that everything is centered. I'm duplicating it. I'm using Command D actually, because I'm on a Mac, to duplicate that shape. I changed the color just so you could see that it was duplicated. And then I'm rotating it 90 degrees, duplicating that shape again, rotating that 90 degrees, and suddenly, so quickly, you have a dodecahedron, which is one of my favorite shapes. It's a 12-sided shape. It's not a regular dodecahedron because it's made up of diamond shapes, but it's a cool shape nonetheless. The Romans actually used to use the shape as dice when they played games. So you see me moving it up the Z-axis, then you see me duplicating it making it a hole in the middle, and you'll see why I want to hollow out the shape. I'm using the align tool to align it again. I'm grouping it. And then you'll see me repeatedly dragging out this work plane. I'm doing that because I want to make sure that I place the shape on that face that I want it to be. And I actually shifted my view from perspective to orthogonal, just so to take away the perspective and make it kind of more 2D, so I can see that I am aligning this hole that I'm placing on that diamond-shaped face, trying to make it as centered as possible. And I'm changing, sometimes you can change your snap grid so that you can move shapes around in smaller increments. So I changed that to 0.5 millimeters so that I could be more precise. I'm stretching out the shape. I'm dropping it down the Z-axis using that arrow at the top. I'm using that view cube in the upper left-hand corner to kind of look around and pan around. I'm duplicating that same shape over again and putting it in a new direction. I'm adding another hole. This time I'm making it actually a little bit bigger. I'm centering it. I'm zooming in. I'm using a mouse, and oftentimes when you're 3D designing, I think Heather will probably agree as well when she shows you FormIt, it's a lot easier. You can use your trackpad, but it's a lot easier when you're 3D designing to use a mouse. So I'm dropping that down. I'm going to duplicate that same shape again and rotate it. And it's starting to look like an everlasting gobstopper, which is cool. That's not what I want it to look like. So once I have it looking how I want it to look, I'm drawing a box around it, I'm grouping it, and then ta-da, I have this cool dodecahedron with holes in it. So I did not stop here. I actually passed my design along to my colleague, Gabby, who's on the Fusion 360 team. So Fusion 360 is another design tool that's free to you as a student or as a teacher. It's also available on Chromebooks now. She used the send to button. So there's a send to button if you have Fusion already installed on your computer that you can send your designs directly from Tinkercad to Fusion. You can do a lot of the same things that you could do in Tinkercad and Fusion, but you can also do more complex things and interesting things. So she actually just very quickly made a linear pattern out of the shape that I sent her. So she's got that one shape or body, and now she is copying that body and moving it out, just kind of similar to how you do in Tinkercad as well. So you'll see it in a moment. So now she has two. And I just told her the theme was play with an idea. So that's what she's doing. And so she's rotating that linear pattern of my dodecahedrons. And what she starts to make it looks almost a little bit like a playground or a play space. So you'll see her next, she's going to start sketching. So in Tinkercad, you can make, really interesting prismatic shapes like you see here. But in Fusion, you can also combine these prismatic shapes with more organic shapes. So that's what she's going to show you next. So she creates a point. She moves that point up the Z-axis there. She starts connecting that point with lines. So you see she's making these lines from that point. So these are straight lines. And then she starts making splines, which is like a curved, more flexible line. She's still connecting it to that point to the bodies that we started to create in Tinkercad. And you can see how quickly and how playfully you can really start to iterate on your idea, just playing around with shapes that you really like, that you find interesting. So she makes another line, she modifies it and shortens it. And eventually you'll see her, so once she makes these sketches and she likes how it looks, she's then going to turn these lines into pipes. So you can see here how quickly and how cool Fusion is that you can quickly turn lines into these interesting pipes. And you can even play around with the shape of the end pipes. So you can make them spikes, you can make them squares. And all you're really doing is kind of pushing and pulling on the faces. So in addition to, these cool pipe shapes, she also did, she used it, I think it's called a quad ball. I have this written down. Yeah, a quad ball. So quad ball is a primitive shape. And this one's really fun. And when you're in the sculpt environment in Fusion, you can really start to, she's just moving it up. You can really start to just kind of play around with the faces on the shape and start pushing and pulling them. And you'll see her do that in a second. So shrinking them. You can also add, so you can see she's pulling it out now. You can add a new face, which she'll do in a moment. And she's also playing around with mirror symmetry, which is an option that you have with this specific shape that she's created, so that the symmetry is happening, the length, the width. So she's stretching it out. And now thinking about how this would function. So she's thinking about how she's going to connect these bodies. So she's pulling out that face, and this is going to be really cool. She's now almost kind of doing like a digital welding of connecting those shapes. So taking those vertices and connecting them and kind of like welding them together digitally to combine those shapes. So what you see right now, it's all the same color because they're all bodies, but she's gonna show how you can go from bodies to components pretty soon. She's still playing around sculpting the pipes, adding another face to it, stretching it out. Almost looks kind of like anthropomorphic thing, like it kind of starting to look like a snake or something. Yep, so here she is going from bodies to components. So you'll see the change in colors. And then finally, the last thing that she's going to show you, and this kind of gets to the contest as well with James, is she's now starting to think about how she's going to tell the story of this design and how she made it, or how it would be manufactured, for example, by creating an exploded view through an animation. So she's almost like filming herself, playing around with the camera controls and moving the different components around in order to create this cool animation that will eventually be an illustration that she could potentially show to others to kind of, tell the story of her design. And there she goes. So it's pretty cool. So that was Tinkercad to Fusion. Just one more thing about Tinkercad. If you're just starting out in Tinkercad and you're in high school, that's totally okay. You can make really cool computational shapes using the Tinkercad code blocks environment as well. This is an example from Jeff Smith, who's from the Fusion team in Autodesk. And he actually made this really cool computational design that to him started to look like a chandelier. So he sent it to Fusion. And in Fusion, he was able to apply physical materials and textures and light in order to create this like photorealistic representation of his design. So Jenny, do we have any responses about our question? So what makes a design modular? Why is modularity a useful design strategy? Did anybody answer that question as I was presenting?
No, that actually wasn't displayed until just now, so.
Okay, well, keep telling us about that. Sorry, I thought I had that slide up front. But keep telling us, what do you think makes a design modular? This will be helpful for you to think about as you are embarking upon the challenge. All right, so next I'm going to hand it over to Heather to do her FormIt demonstration. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Great, thanks, Kellyanne. You should be able to see my screen now, as well as myself. So Yeah, thanks, Kellyanne, and also thanks, James. It's been fun teaching both of them how to use FormIt, and I hope to show you guys a little bit about FormIt now. Just a little bit more about me. My college degree was in math, actually, and one of the reasons I chose math is because my college also didn't have architecture, but I kind of knew I wanted to study architecture, so I took a lot of math classes and I took a lot of art classes, and then I went to graduate school for architecture. So I am a licensed architect, and then I moved to Autodesk and got into designing and developing software for architects and the engineering industry. That's a little bit more about me. So I'm excited to show you FormIt now. And FormIt is a 3D sketching tool for architects and designers who want to explore early stage design concepts. You can create forms, edit geometry, apply materials, set up views, and walk through your model. FormIt is available on 3 platforms. So it's available as a Windows desktop application, which is what I'm going to show you here today. So you have to have a Windows operating system for this version to work. It also is available as a web app, which can launch from any browser. And it's available as an iPad app. So you can take your design really anywhere and be designing and editing, from any location you want. So I'm going to give you a short overview of FormIt's capabilities, and we will make available to you more help documentation and more videos, so you can also learn more of it on your own and consider using it for this design challenge. So first off, one thing you're going to be asked to do as soon as you launch FormIt is to sign in. And I'm already signed in here, you'll see, with my Autodesk ID, and you'll have an Autodesk Education ID that you'll use to launch FormIt. Now, I always recommend making sure you have the latest version of FormIt, and from the formit.autodesk.com website, you can download FormIt, you can launch the FormIt web application, and you can get lots of learning tools as well. And then this is just the FormIt YouTube channel, which also has a lot of great learning tools for you. Now, back in FormIt, I wanted to show you a few of the navigation tools that James was using earlier. So you can orbit, you can pan, you can zoom in and out. And I like to do this with my mouse, like Kellyanne mentioned. I do like to have a mouse with me when I'm modeling in 3D. Now over here on the left-hand screen, this is how I'll start a new sketch or model. I'll open an existing one or save a model as well from that location. This tool, called the location tool, allows me to type in an address or the name of a city, and it will bring up a map, a realistic map of that area. And I'm gonna just use this because I'm from Boston, and this is actually the Autodesk offices, that area right there. I picked a site that's near the office to use as my example. And what I can do is import that image into FormIt, and I can actually bring in just the 2D satellite image. I can also bring in the 3D terrain. So here, I've already done it. So you can see in my model here, I have this area of Boston in here. And I can turn that layer, it's on a layer, I can turn that on and off if I want to see the satellite image or not. Now, I want to show you here under settings and units, I'm using the imperial units, which is common in the United States to do feet and inches, but you might want to do metric, especially if you're from Canada or from another country. I know everyone uses metric except us here in the US. So now what I'm going to show you is, I have some buildings that are kind of contextual buildings that I've drawn on the site here. And I'm going to use a few tools to start drawing kind of extrude this building here on the site. And I just want to show you here, like Kellyanne was showing in Tinkercad, in Revit, you do also have those kind of primitive geometric shapes like the cube and the dome and the pyramid and the cylinder. And you can start placing those in Revit as a really simple way to get started. So I'm going to place 2 cubes here and have them overlap a little bit. And you'll see that I can grab the faces of them and push and pull them and change the sizes. I can be more accurate by typing in a number of feet. I can also grab an edge, and if I hold down the shift key, I can lock it to the Z-axis. I can also cut start to cut elements out of each other. So this is a Boolean cut operation where I joined these two and then deleted one of those forms to start making this shape. Some other tools I like to use a lot are using lines in the rectangle tool. Here I just clicked 3 points to create that surface plane, and then I just dragged it up or extruded it up there. And I'm going to draw another shape right next to this shape, and I just want to show you that now when I select that element, I double click to select, they both get selected. So they automatically join if they're touching. And that can be great in some situations, but there are other times when you don't want that to happen. In that case, you want to use what's called a group in FormIt, and you can right click and choose to group. So now when I create that same kind of rectangular tower next to this element, you'll see that they don't automatically join. So I can select one element or the other. And in this case, I'm selecting just the larger rectangle itself, and I double clicked inside of it, and now I'm editing the group. And I use that arc tool. So maybe I want to carve out of this shape that I just created. So I can create an arc there and just extrude it down basically and delete that corner to make it round. What I'm showing here is I just drew on the face of this building, and I can push this shape through and create a void that goes all the way through this solid object. And FormIt is a solid modeler, which means it's great for sending models like this to 3D printing. You really want a solid modeling tool to do that with. And something I'm going to show here, I'm going to undo this a little bit and get this back to that main shape, because I want to show you another thing. So there's so what I just showed you is great for modeling like the exterior of buildings and getting that massing down, but like for this design challenge, we also want you to think about the interior of a space. So I'm going to use another tool here called Shell Solid, and I select that object and I click OK. Now, initially it just looks the same, but what I'm going to do is draw another rectangle on this face and push that through, and what you'll see is the whole inside of that space is now a void, right? It's kind of like I've carved out the inside of a pumpkin, and I can go in there and I can look around now. So this is how I start to model interior spaces inside of FormIt. The next thing I'm going to do is, so I created a few little like buildings over here that I started to think, oh, maybe these would be like a design for this design challenge or something. And what I'm going to do here is show you how to create a section plane, which will allow me to cut through that geometry. So again, I can kind of get inside my building and start to look at that design. And this is controlled by layers. So I'm turning on and off a few layers over here on the right-hand side. This is an example of a section cut I already made that's showing what I'm calling kind of like the first floor plan. So I can see the first floor of all of my, of all of the sort of 3 modular pieces of my building. Another example here is a vertical section cut, which I placed in the same way. And this is cutting, of course, vertically through my building. And I can drag this sort of plane back and forth to either cut my building or be outside of my building. And here I'm going to drag it forward again and cut through a different part of my building. And again, this is really useful when I need to get inside of that building and maybe add some more detail there. So the next thing I'm going to do is show you a few more advanced tools. So in this example here, I have with like a window frame that I've created with this extrusion, and it's inside of a group itself. Now I'm going to right click on it, and within the right click menu, I have a lot of options, including how to group and ungroup things or make a group unique. In this case, I'm going to use the array tool, and the array tool is going to allow me to copy this shape I've created down to the other 3 windows that I already made. So now I have 4 instances of the same group. So when I go and I edit this face, for example, and I'm going to right click on this again and show you a new menu here, I'm going to use what's called the tilt face tool, and I'm going to drag that out. You'll see all of those instances of that group, all 4 instances just changed at once. The next thing I'm going to do is go back into that group again, and I'm going to start to apply some materials to the group. Now, I already have some materials loaded into this project file. They're called in Sketch. So I'm going to click on that for example, wood plank, and I'm going to click on the different faces of my window frame, and I'm going to apply that material to this window frame. And just like with the edits to the geometry, changing the material, of course, makes that change to all 4 group instances at once. And I can go back in and so I missed like this side of this face, so I went back in there and I clicked and I added it again. Now, it's gonna happen when you start a new file in FormIt, you're not gonna have as many materials as I have. So what you're gonna wanna do is click on the materials sample library, and inside of here, you can preview all kinds of different materials and click them to bring them into your model. So here I'm gonna go into the brick and block folder. I'm gonna pick a new block or a new brick pattern, and I've just brought it into my sketch. So now I can click on that brick and block and go in and maybe edit, change the material on the main wall face of this building. So I'm just going around and clicking the faces again and applying that new material to change that material out. And again, that's what's in Sketch versus these material samples, which you can then load into your sketch or into your model. Okay, the next tool I'm going to show you is, so I have this big blank wall right now, and maybe I want to make a big picture window out of it, similar to what I have on the other building there. So I'm going to use this offset face tool, which again is in that right click menu. And I just offset the face and I drag it to remove it completely. So now this is just a big opening in this wall. So really I want a piece of glass here because it's probably not going to just be completely open to the outside. So I'm going to use that rectangle tool and create a flat surface there. Now I could just apply a glass material right at this point, but I'm going to show you a different tool called the storefront curtain wall tool. And what this is going to do is I can select that face and hit generate, and it's using Dynamo, which is a visual scripting language, and behind the scenes it's kind of churning, and it's going to create this grid system of what we call mullions, and then the glass itself. And I can make adjustments to it, so I'm going to change the spacing of the grid or mullions and get larger panels of glass here. And now I'm going to apply a glass material to the glass on this wall. And now you'll see I have a nice big picture window for this space. Now I'm going to show you a couple scenes. So I have a few scenes set up, or sort of perspective views I've already set up for us. This is one showing kind of this upper level sort of balcony of one of the spaces. And I'm using what's called the swivel tool. So it's basically like you as a person standing still and your head is rotating around there. And I'll go back, I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. What I'm going to show here is I have a shape of what I'm going to use for a railing that goes along the edge of this balcony. So I select that face and then I select the edges that I want it to sweep around. And now I just created a railing for that shape. And again, maybe I need to understand sort of, well, how does this look in the space? I want to sort of swivel my head around. What does the view outside of this space look like? You know, what does the railing look like? And I want to point out this stair is another, what we call a dynamo sort of a script. And I can place that, I can grab that stair and drag it into my view and we'll place a stair. And then I have different variables. I can change, say, the width of the stair. I can change the landings. I can change the height of each step of the stair. So there's a lot of good tools on that Dynamo panel for you to use. The next thing I'm going to show is I'm just maneuvering and I'm setting up a new scene. So in this case, I'm going to click on that plus symbol at the top of the scenes dialog, and I just named it new scene. And I have some other scenes set up already, and I'm double clicking and it's kind of animating through these scenes. Here, I'm going to pause for a second. So this like kind of weird gray object over here was my attempt at making like some kind of a cool climbing wall in this space, since it was such a big space. Anyway, I thought that was kind of fun. So here, I showed you a little bit about how to animate between scenes. Now I'm going to show you actually a tool that James was using is the fly-through tool with that little guy with the jetpack there, the fly-through mode. So I think James showed this off better than I did. I think I get a little dizzy when I try to navigate with my WASD keys and walk around this building. But what I was trying to do here was sort of walk around the building. I'm going to pause and sort of look up at the windows I created, and then go sort of into this space and look around this space and sort of look outside again. And I think, again, this is a great tool for you to kind of just helps you describe how do you want to describe your design. You can use these tools to do that. And the last thing I'm going to show you is just a little bit about visual styles. So you can change like shadows, you can change the brightness, you can change the way this is represented in terms of making it a little bit more sketchy. Here I'm going to show like adding thick edges and hidden edges and extended edges. And it just brings personality, your personality to the design and to the way you want to visually represent your design. Here I'm changing the sky color a little bit as well. And again, it helps, I think, to personalize your design. And again, like I said, just sort of, you know, bring your ideas to life. So I hope that kind of gives you a quick overview of some of what FormIt has to offer. There are lots of other tools, especially around analysis like sun and shadow studies and solar energy analysis, and that we might get into at a later point. There are also lots of good tools and information and learning tools on that from the website. So as a recap, I showed you some of the basic modeling techniques. I showed you how to group your elements in your model to sort of organize it better. I showed you some advanced modeling tools like sweep and shell and tilt face and array. We placed materials and we animated some scenes and walkthroughs. So I hope that you find you can explore FormIt and maybe use it within this design challenge. So thanks, Kelly. That's all I wanted to share today.
Heather, that was awesome. I feel like I learned so much every time you show us FormIt, so thank you. I also just want to say thank you to everyone who is sticking around. So the next step is we're going to, well, first, we're just interested in a poll question. So this is not necessarily a poll. You can just raise your hand. So that was a lot to think about. And I love, again, learning from architects like Heather. So raise your hand if you agree with this statement. So architecture is more of an art than a science. So I'm noticing a bunch of people are raising their hands. Jenny, do you have a tally yet so far? What's the percentage?
We have just about half so far.
So is architecture more of an art than a science? And one of the things I wanted to say to the teachers who are out there, particularly if you're accessing this as a recording as well to use with your students later, we'll talk to you about how you can access the recording, but these might even be places within, you know, showing the recording to your students that you could stop and, you know, have more of an in-depth discussion than we're having here about these questions. So Jenny, what was it, about 50% total?
Yes, we're right at about 50%.
Awesome. So this could be a fun debate or four corners activity, for example. All right, so last but not least, so for those of you who are sticking around to hear about the contest, now we're going to talk a little bit more about the contest and kind of just reiterate what James was talking about earlier in terms of you know, how you can help him with his vision and help him execute it. So this page, so autodesk.com/Autodesk Make It Real is going to be your source throughout the year of information. So this program, this is the first episode, and this program is going to be running until May. So we're trying to kind of pace it with the school year as well. So please, you know, we'll continue to update this page, but please keep going to autodesk.com/Autodesk Make It Real for information. So that information might also include upcoming webinars. But for now, what we have on that page is information about the first design challenge. So just to reiterate what James talked about, The first challenge is to design an aspect of the gym to help James tell his story. So again, James is reimagining and designing a flexible gym space. He talks about that concept of modularity, for example, or like having spaces with multiple purposes too. That promotes health and wellness for athletes like him. So he's also thinking about, as his end user, athletes who have suffered from injuries, for example, and are trying to recover. So keep that in mind as you are designing. Your end product should present a clear visual depiction of the design and could look like an inspiration board or even a pitch to stakeholders. So James isn't just a designer and a builder and a football player, but he's also an entrepreneur. So he may need to actually, pitch his idea to stakeholders like investors, for example. Or, once he really nails down the location where he wants to build his gym, he may need to bring in the community and, and to let the community know that, this building is meant to make the community a better place. So how could he, tell his story in that way? So you could create it using one or more of Autodesk products. So you could use Tinkercad. And again, Tinkercad can be found at tinkercad.com. It's really easy to sign up and it's free for everyone. You could do a Tinkercad to Fusion workflow, Fusion 360, FormIt. We didn't show AutoCAD, but I know that a lot of schools actually use AutoCAD. So that's also another tool that has a web version as well. If you are working on Chromebooks from home in the way that you're learning, for example, you could use AutoCAD. And Revit is another design tool that I know that schools are using. Heather actually was on the Revit team before she was on the FormIt team. And it's a very, it's one of the most common tool that architects and engineers use to design together. So it should include both text and images, and it should be presented in the form of an Instructable. So I know that we have thrown a lot of tools and ideas at you today. So Instructables is another member of the Autodesk family. It's a place where you can go for inspiration, for do-it-yourself projects, from, making cookies to like, designing a lamp, for example, or like an outdoor pool with a heater. So this is just an example of what an Instructable looks like. And this was made by a student. It's just you're thinking about step-by-step instructions that shows your process and maybe even tells others how you made it so that they can maybe learn from you and make it themselves. And this is just an example from Tinkercad that also shows that you can make really complex, architectural, really beautiful designs using Tinkercad too, if that's where you're starting. And also constraints sometimes bring about creativity, which is one of the criteria that we're going to be looking at for the contest. So judging criteria, you should be demonstrating your technical skills wherever you're starting from. So demonstrating your 3D digital literacy, the creative ways that you're combining shapes and trying out all of the cool strategies and techniques that hopefully I and Heather showed you today. Innovation, so how imaginatively are you addressing the constraints of designing a gym, even thinking about designing a gym in the COVID era. So how interesting, cool, surprising is the design? How are you showing your creativity, your cleverness, and thinking about consideration of form and function? We also will be judging you on your design thinking. So there's a description there of design thinking. In the resource folder that we'll be sharing with you via email that will also link to the contest page, we will include some more information, maybe even about design thinking to help you through this process. We also do have slower versions of the recordings that we showed today, so those will be included in that resource folder as well. And presentation is really important to this challenge because really James, where he is right now in his process, is really kind of telling the story of his vision. So how compelling does whatever it is that you make tell a story that's relevant to James's vision? And how are you using techniques like showing sections of the building or an exploded view like I showed you today, or the walkthrough that Heather showed you when she was demonstrating FormIt? So what are some ways that you can really help your viewer really kind of wrap their head around your design and understand how it works? So the rules, so this contest currently, so this particular challenge is open to legal residents of the United States and Canada ages 13 to 19 years old, who are students. So you could be in an elementary school, like a K-8 school, and you're 13. Secondary, so high school, you could be a homeschool student. But do know that if you're not someone who lives in the United States or Canada, you can still participate in all of the webinars as well. This is just for the purposes of the contest. So there are prizes for each of the challenges. So this first challenge ends on January 31st, and then we'll introduce the next challenge shortly thereafter in another webinar. For each of the challenges, there will be 3 winners, so 9 grand prize winners in total across all 3 challenges. The grand prize winners will win a $500 gift card from our friends at CDW. There'll also be 10 runners up for each design challenge, and you'll get a really cool swag bag with like cool Instructables, regalia, maybe some Tinkercad stuff. So we want to spread the love around through prizes. Recognition is fun, but prizes are also fun too. Our friends at CDW actually made this page for you. We weren't sure if you would be familiar with CDW because it's more of like a business that businesses order from for, technology like hardware and software. So they made this prize gallery for you to show you some of the cool things that you could get with your gift card. So you could get a 3D printer, you could get a computer. So this is a ThinkPad with your gift card. You could get a VR headset. So that's the Lenovo icon at the bottom. Or you could get a combination of things. So you could get an iPad mini and a stylus for the iPad mini, for example, as long as you're keeping it at that kind of $500 equivalent. And they are also happy to help you. You're going to get VIP service from CDW if you're a grand prize winner. So the schedule for the webinars, so we've already done December, so this is Play with an Idea. We didn't have a lot of time for like back and forth kind of question and answer. Know that in January, we are going to be doing a webinar. It's going to be a little bit later on in January. We'll announce at autodesk.com/Autodesk Make It Real. And this is meant to be an opportunity for you to meet some architects and also to ask questions to them. And the idea is that you are already engaged in the challenges. So you might have questions even particular to the challenge. In February, we're going to do another webinar in which James is going to be presenting where he's at in his journey. And then in March, and that challenge is going to be focused on engineering. So we might have for our March panel, a civil engineer, a geotechnical, or MEP. Heather, James will also be joining too, so we can continue to ask us questions. April, we're going to shift into thinking more about breaking ground. What's the game plan for our construction project? The challenge is going to be more construction oriented and less design oriented. And then in May, we will wrap up with a fun panel with people in the construction industry, so construction project managers, etc. So that is what is in store for the webinars. And again, anyone can attend the webinars, and we will announce them at autodesk.com/Autodesk Make It Real. One more last resource that I wanted to share with you is Autodesk collaborates with the ACE Mentor Program. So if you're a student who's really interested in architecture, engineering, and construction, and you're looking for mentorship, ACE Mentor Program is a national program, at least in the United States, that has affiliates all over the place. I know that we have an affiliate in Boston. Paulette, who is the director of the West for the ACE Mentor Program, has provided her contact information and other information here that you can use so that you can, connect with the ACE Mentor Program and join the program. And that is it. And I'm so pleased with everybody who stuck around. We ran a little bit over what we intended, but we hope that you have enjoyed this webinar. I'm not sure if people want to turn on their cameras and say goodbye. I'd like to thank everyone. So I see Jenny. Oh, so there you all. James, do you want to say anything before we wrap up?
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in for this hour and a half, for give or take a couple minutes. But I'm really looking forward to seeing your ideas, and hopefully we can have some fun Q&A later on, and we can kind of talk a little bit more, get to know each other a little bit further. But I'm really looking forward to this. And I think it's, I mean, it's already been such a great learning experience for me. And I really appreciate the opportunity to learn as much as I have to date. So I'm really looking forward to furthering that in the next few months.
Thank you, James, and thank you for your adorable children hanging in there as well. I know it's probably a late night for them.
I actually didn't even know it was him. He like just walked into my vision, and that was my middle son.
He's ready to be a star. He wants his own webinar, James. Heather, is anything you wanted to say before we go?
No, just thanks for letting me show you FormIt, and I'm happy to connect and answer any questions at our next live session, or however we can answer questions for people. I'm excited to see what you guys come up with.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. Jenny, were there any kind of burning questions that we can answer in the next few minutes?
Well, I did have one question that came through for James. This person wants to know, will all the equipment in the gym be off the shelf, or are you considering custom solutions?
I mean, right now, probably off the shelf. I'm actually in this process right now is looking into outfit a gym down here in Jersey, but at smaller scale. Nothing that I'm going to really like build from ground up. So right now, I would imagine probably more, off the shelf type gym equipment. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we can't, get more and more creative and build things. I mean, like Heather showed a rock climbing wall. I actually had that in my notes to bring up, but I think that would be a great use of space. And even like monkey bars. I mean, and that's kind of stuff that we could definitely build on our own. We don't have to outsource that. So there can definitely be a little of both, I'd say.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else, Jenny?
Not really. We did have a couple of people ask to see some of Heather's demonstration again. And as we already talked about, we're going to be sending a link to today's presentation so that people can review at their own pace.
Awesome.
Get a hold of those details.
And Kellyanne,
yep.
One thing I wanted to say real quick is some of the comments, some of the questions I saw, a lot of people were like, this is overwhelming, this is a lot, this is too much. And I just want to stress to people that, I mean, we're going through this rapid fire. We're really quickly running you through all this stuff. And it's much easier when you sit down, take your time, and just kind of play with it a little bit. And you'll really quickly start to learn how it works and how to do stuff. So don't be overwhelmed by just the mass amount of information that's flowing to you right now.
Thank you for bringing that up, Matthew. And again, also for teachers who are out there, we will have recordings, we will have resources. I have a slower version of my Tinkercad demonstration, and also we have a slower version of Gabby's Fusion demonstration. And the idea of showing you all these tools all at once is wherever you are in your design journey, get started. If you're starting in Tinkercad, that's fine too. You might finish in Tinkercad and it might be this like awesome design that we hadn't considered before. So wherever you are in your process, you can still show innovation and creativity within those constraints. Right, so I think it's time for us all to say goodnight. So at least on the East Coast, it's 8:30 now. So everyone take care. Please look out on the contest page to find out how you can register for the next webinar, where we will have more time for discussion and questions. And that will be probably like late January. I'm thinking January 23rd, but I don't want to announce it yet until I confirm with everyone. All right, so everyone take care, have a good night, and we can't wait to see what you make. So thank you, good night.